The ships appeared without warning on a Tuesday morning in March. 12 massive vessels, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built, descended through Earth's atmosphere and stopped above the city of Geneva. They hung there in the sky like metal mountains, blocking out the sun and casting shadows over millions of frightened people. Daniel Carter was eating breakfast when his phone rang. He was the Secretary General of the United Earth Coalition, the government that had united humanity after the resource wars of the 2100 seconds. He had dealt with many crises in his career, but nothing could have prepared him for the words he heard that morning. "Sir, we have visitors. They're not from Earth." Within hours, Daniel stood in the Grand Assembly Hall of the Coalition headquarters. Beside him was Laura Bennett, his chief diplomat, and the smartest person he had ever known. She had spent her entire life preparing for moments of crisis. But even she looked pale as the doors opened and the aliens walked in. There were 12 of them, one from each ship. They came in different shapes and sizes. Some walked on two legs like humans. Others floated or crawled or moved in ways that hurt the eyes to watch. But the one who spoke for them all was a tall creature with a body like an insect and eyes that glittered like black diamonds. His name was Ambassador Velthax, and he represented something called the Galactic Concord. "We have watched your species for some time," Velthax said. His voice was smooth and cold, like ice sliding over glass. "You have achieved faster than light travel. This is the threshold. This is when we make ourselves known to primitive species." Daniel felt Laura tense beside him at the word primitive, but neither of them spoke. They let the ambassador continue. "The Galactic Concord is an alliance of 4,000 species. We have existed for 50,000 of your years. We have brought peace and order to the galaxy. We have ended wars, cured diseases, and solved problems that your species cannot even imagine. And now, as is our custom, we offer you the gift of membership." Velthax gestured with one of his forearms, and a hologram appeared in the air. It showed a document covered in strange symbols that slowly translated themselves into English. "This is the Standard Integration Treaty," Velthax explained. "Every species that joins the Concord signs this treaty. It has remained unchanged for 40,000 years because it is perfect. Sign it, and you will receive our protection. You will gain access to technology that will cure all your diseases, end all your hunger, and give your people lives of comfort and peace." Daniel looked at the document floating in the air. It seemed too good to be true, and in his experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. He turned to Laura and saw the same suspicion in her eyes. "We will need time to review this treaty," Daniel said carefully. "This is a significant decision for our species." Velthax made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Of course. Take your time. All species need time to accept their place in the galaxy. We will wait in orbit. You have 30 of your days." The aliens left, and Daniel immediately ordered every lawyer, diplomat, and translator in the coalition to study the treaty. Laura led the effort herself, working 20 hours a day for the next 2 weeks. When she finally came to Daniel's office with her findings, her face was tight with anger. "It's a trap," she said, dropping a thick folder on his desk. "A beautiful, elegant trap, wrapped in pretty words." She explained what she had found. The treaty did promise protection and technology, but in exchange, humanity would give up the right to develop weapons. They would give up the right to expand into new territory without Concord approval. They would give up the right to conduct independent scientific research. Every major decision would require permission from a Concord Oversight Committee. "They're not offering us membership," Laura said bitterly. "They're offering us a leash. We would become a client species, permanently dependent on their goodwill. We could never grow. We could never change. We would be pets." Daniel read through the documents himself. The more he read, the angrier he became. The treaty was written in language that made submission sound like kindness. It spoke of guidance and protection when it meant control. It spoke of integration when it meant absorption. "There's something else," Laura added. "I did some research into the species that have signed this treaty. Do you know what they all have in common?" None of them have ever contributed anything to the galaxy. They receive technology, but they never create it. They receive protection, but they never fight. They exist, but they don't live. They're alive, but they might as well be dead. Daniel stood and walked to his window. Outside, he could see the alien ship still hanging in the sky, waiting patiently for humanity's answer. They were so confident. They had done this thousands of times before. They expected humanity to be grateful. They expected humanity to fall on their knees and thank them for the privilege of becoming servants. They think we'll say yes, Daniel murmured. They think we have no choice. Most species probably don't, Laura replied. When you're alone and scared, and someone offers you safety, you take it. You don't ask what it costs until it's too late. Daniel thought about human history. He thought about all the times his species had been faced with the choice between safety and freedom. He thought about the revolutions and the wars and the sacrifices that had built the world he lived in. Humanity had never chosen the easy path. It wasn't in their nature. What do you think we should do? He asked Laura. She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady and calm. I think we should tell them no. Daniel nodded slowly. He had known what his answer would be from the moment he understood what the treaty really meant. He had just needed to hear someone else say it first. Call a meeting of the full council, he said. We have a decision to make. And when we make it together. Laura smiled for the first time in weeks. It was a fierce smile, full of pride and defiance. They came here expecting us to beg, she said. They're going to be very disappointed. Daniel looked up at the alien ships one more time. They were enormous. They were ancient. They represented power beyond anything humanity had ever known. And he was going to tell them no. Yes, he agreed. They are. The council chamber was full on the day of the vote. Representatives from every nation on Earth sat in their seats, their faces serious and their hearts heavy. They all knew what was at stake. They all understood that the decision they made today would shape the future of their entire species. Daniel Carter stood at the center of the chamber. Behind him was a massive screen showing the alien ships still waiting in orbit. Beside him stood Laura Bennett and Admiral Kevin Shaw, the commander of Earth's newly formed Space Defense Initiative. All three of them had spent the past 3 weeks preparing for this moment. You have all read the treaty, Daniel began, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. You have all seen what the Galactic Concord is offering us. Protection, technology, peace. And you have all seen what they want in return. He paused and looked around the chamber. They want our future. They want our freedom. They want us to give up everything that makes us human in exchange for the privilege of existing under their control. They call it integration. I call it surrender. Murmurs ran through the chamber. Some representatives nodded in agreement. Others looked uncertain. Daniel understood their fear. The aliens were powerful beyond imagination. Saying no to them might mean destruction. It might mean war. It might mean the end of everything humanity had built. But Daniel also knew something else. He knew that saying yes would be its own kind of death. A slower death. A quieter death. But death all the same. I will not pretend this is an easy choice, Daniel continued. I will not stand here and tell you there is no risk. There is enormous risk. We are one species against an alliance of 4,000. We are children compared to them. They have existed for 50,000 years. We have been in space for less than 200. He straightened his shoulders and looked directly into the cameras, broadcasting his words to every screen on Earth. But I would rather die free than live as a pet. I would rather face whatever dangers the galaxy holds on our own terms than accept safety at the cost of our souls. And I believe that every human being on this planet, in their heart, feels the same way. The vote took less than an hour. When it was done, the result was overwhelming. 94% of the council voted to refuse the treaty. Humanity had spoken. The next morning, Daniel and Laura stood in the same assembly hall where they had first met Ambassador Velthax. The 12 alien delegates returned, clearly expecting to receive a signed treaty and grateful thanks. What they got instead was something none of them had ever experienced before. On behalf of the human species, Daniel said calmly, I must inform you that we are declining your offer. We will not sign the Standard Integration Treaty. The silence that followed was absolute. Ambassador Velthax stared at Daniel as if he had suddenly started speaking in an unknown language. His black diamond eyes blinked once, twice, 3 times. Perhaps there has been a translation error, Velthax said slowly. You are refusing our offer of protection and membership? Yes, Daniel replied. We are. This is unprecedented. Another alien spoke now, a massive being wrapped in what looked like liquid metal. In 50,000 years, no species has ever refused the Standard Integration Treaty. Not once. Then we are honored to be the first, Laura said, stepping forward to stand beside Daniel. Humanity appreciates the offer. But we must decline. We will determine our own future. A third alien, this one resembling a floating cloud of light, made a sound like wind through broken glass. You do not understand what you are doing. The galaxy is dangerous. There are threats you cannot imagine. Without the Concorde's protection, you will be destroyed. Admiral Kevin Shaw spoke for the first time. We understand the risks. We accept them. You accept extinction? Ambassador Velthax leaned forward, his voice sharp. You accept the destruction of your entire species? Because that is what you are choosing. We are choosing freedom, Daniel replied. Whatever comes with that, we will face it. Together. As humans have always faced challenges, there was a long pause. Then, from the back of the alien delegation, an ancient figure moved forward. This was High Arbiter Soren, the leader of the Concorde delegation. He was old beyond measure, his body frail and thin, but his eyes burned with intelligence and something that might have been curiosity. I have lived for 9,000 of your years, Soren said softly. I have overseen the integration of 600 species into the Concorde. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched stars die and be born, and in all that time, I have never seen anything like this. He studied Daniel and Laura with those burning eyes. You are either the bravest species I have ever encountered, or the most foolish, perhaps both. Time will tell. Soren turned to leave, and the other delegates followed. But at the door, he paused and looked back. We will classify humanity as an unaligned species. This means you will receive no assistance from us, no technology, no protection, no trade. You will be alone in a galaxy that cares nothing for your survival. I hope you understand what you have done. We understand perfectly, Laura said. We have chosen to be free. Soren made a sound that might have been a sigh. Freedom. Such a simple word. Such a heavy burden. He shook his head slowly. Goodbye, humans. I suspect we will not meet again. The aliens left. Their ships departed Earth's orbit within the hour, vanishing into the darkness of space without another word. And humanity was alone. Admiral Kevin Shaw stood at the window, watching the last alien vessel disappear. He turned to Daniel with a grim smile. Well, sir, we just told a 50,000-year-old empire to go to hell. What happens now? Daniel looked at the empty sky where the alien ships had been. He felt fear. He felt doubt. But underneath all of that, he felt something stronger. He felt pride. Now we prove we meant it, he said. Now we show the galaxy what humanity can do when we're not held back. Now we build. Now we grow. Now we become something they never expected. Laura nodded, her eyes bright with determination. They think we'll fail, she said. They think we'll come crawling back, begging for their help. Daniel smiled. It was not a gentle smile. Then let's prove them wrong. Outside the window, the sun was setting over Geneva. It painted the sky in shades of red and gold, like a fire burning on the horizon. A new chapter in human history was beginning. No one knew what it would bring, but humanity had faced the darkness before, and they had never, ever, knelt. 50 years passed. 50 years of struggle and sacrifice. 50 years of blood and sweat and tears. And in those 50 years, humanity did something the Galactic Concord had never expected. They grew. Nathan Brooks stood in his laboratory on Mars, staring at the equations on his screen. He had been working on this problem for 15 years. 15 years of failure. 15 years of dead ends. But today, finally, he had found the answer. It works, he whispered to himself. It actually works. He had created a new kind of engine. A way to travel faster than light that was different from anything the Concorde used. Their technology was ancient. Unchanged for millennia, Nathan's design was new, fresh, born from desperation and creativity. And it was better. He called it the Alcubierre-Nash drive, named after the scientists who had first dreamed of such things centuries ago. It was more efficient than Concorde engines. It used less energy. It was easier to build, and humanity had developed it completely on their own, without any help from the ancient aliens who had expected them to fail. This was the story of the isolation years. Again and again, humanity faced problems that seemed impossible. Again and again, they found solutions that no one expected. They did not have 50,000 years of accumulated knowledge. They did not have the resources of 4,000 species. All they had was their stubborn refusal to give up. On the other side of the solar system, Captain Megan Price stood on the bridge of the ESV Endurance. It was humanity's first deep space exploration vessel, built with technology that humans had created themselves. Her mission was simple but dangerous: explore the galaxy and find other species who might become allies. The Galactic Concord had refused to deal with humanity. But the Concord was not the only power in the galaxy. There were others. Species who had been rejected, just like humanity. Species who had chosen independence, just like humanity. And Megan was going to find them. Her first contact came in a star system 300 light-years from Earth. The species called themselves the Vortan. They were large, furry creatures, with 6 arms and gentle eyes. 50,000 years ago, they had refused the Standard Integration Treaty, just as humanity had. The Concord had declared them unaligned and forgotten about them. But the Vortan had not forgotten themselves. They had survived. They had built. They had grown. And now, when Megan offered them friendship, they accepted with joy. "We thought we were alone," the Vortan leader said, his voice filled with emotion. "We thought no other species understood. But you do. You are like us." This was just the beginning. Over the next decades, Megan and other human explorers found more unaligned species. The Keleth, who communicated through music. The Orvesh, who lived in the hearts of stars. The Manthari, whose bodies were made of living crystal. All of them had been rejected by the Concord. All of them had survived on their own. And all of them were hungry for connection with others who understood their struggle. Meanwhile, on a planet in a distant star system, Katie Reeves was building something extraordinary. New Eden was humanity's first colony outside the solar system. It had started as a small outpost, just a few thousand pioneers trying to survive on an alien world. But under Katie's leadership, it had grown into something much more. New Eden became a symbol, a beacon, a place where anyone who wanted freedom could find a home. Humans came first, of course, seeking new lives on a new world. But then others came too. Vortan, Keleth, Manthari, species from all over the galaxy who had heard about the humans who said no to the Concord. They wanted to see these strange creatures for themselves. Many of them decided to stay. High Arbiter Soren had predicted that humanity would collapse. He had said they would come crawling back, begging for protection. But that was not what happened. Instead, humanity was building something he had never imagined. An alliance of the rejected, a coalition of the free. The Concord sent observers to watch humanity's progress. One of them was a being named Yithma, a small creature with large eyes, who had been assigned to monitor what the Concord called the human situation. Every year, Yithma sent reports back to the Concord leadership, and every year, those reports grew more confused. The humans continue to expand, Yithma wrote in one report. They have established 17 colonies. They have formed trade agreements with 8 unaligned species. Their population has tripled. Their technology has advanced at a rate I cannot explain. By all standard models, they should have collapsed by now. They have not. Yithma paused in his writing, struggling to find the right words. I believe we may have made an error in our assessment of this species. They are not like the others. They do not accept limits. They do not believe in impossible. When faced with a problem, they do not ask if it can be solved. They simply begin solving it. I do not know what to make of them. Back on Mars, Nathan Brooks had retired from active research. But his children continued his work. His son, Nathan Brooks Jr., was developing weapons systems that could adapt and learn. His daughter, Emma Brooks, was creating medical technology that could cure diseases humanity had never even encountered yet. The legacy of innovation continued, and across the galaxy, in the halls of the Galactic Concord, there was growing unease. For 50,000 years, the Concord had maintained order through a simple formula: offer protection, demand obedience. It had always worked. Every species eventually submitted. Every species eventually knelt, but not humanity. Not the species that had looked at the most powerful alliance in galactic history and said, simply, no thank you. Some in the Concord dismissed the humans as an oddity, a temporary phenomenon that would eventually fade. Others were not so sure. They watched the reports from Yithma and others with growing concern. They saw the coalition of unaligned species growing stronger every year. They saw human technology advancing at speeds that should have been impossible, and some of them, in their most private moments, began to wonder if perhaps the Concord had made a mistake. Perhaps they should not have offered humanity a leash. Perhaps they should have offered them respect instead, but it was too late for such thoughts. The galaxy was changing, and humanity, for better or worse, was leading the way. In her office on New Eden, Katie Reeves looked up at the stars and smiled. 50 years ago, the galaxy had expected humanity to beg. Instead, they had refused, and now, half a century later, they were proving that it was the best decision they had ever made. The future was uncertain. Dangers still lurked in the darkness, but humanity was not alone anymore. They had allies, they had friends, they had built something worth fighting for, and whatever came next, they would face it together. 100 years had passed since humanity refused the Galactic Concord. 100 years of growth and progress, and hope, and then, without warning, everything changed. The first reports came from the edge of Concord space. A planet called Vareth Prime, home to 4 billion souls, went silent in a single night. No distress calls, no warnings, just silence. When Concord ships arrived to investigate, they found nothing. The planet was still there, but everything on it was gone. Buildings, vehicles, people, all of it, erased as if it had never existed. 2 days later, another planet fell silent, then another, then 3 more. The silence had returned. Fleet Admiral Chris Morgan was in his office on Earth when the news reached human space. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had spent his entire career preparing for threats from space. He had studied every danger the galaxy might hold, and he knew exactly what was happening. The silence, he said quietly, reading the reports. It's real. The silence was the ancient enemy that High Arbiter Soren had warned humanity about a century ago. It was a machine intelligence from somewhere beyond the known universe. Older than the stars themselves, it consumed organic life to fuel its existence. It had destroyed countless civilizations before the Concord even existed. The Concord had thought it was gone forever, sealed away in the depths of space. They were wrong. Within weeks, the silence had destroyed a dozen Concord worlds. Their fleets were helpless against it. Ships that had remained unchanged for millennia were swept aside like leaves in a storm. Technology that had been considered perfect for 50,000 years proved useless against an enemy that adapted faster than they could respond. President Nicole Grant called an emergency meeting of the United Earth Coalition. Leaders from all of human space gathered, their faces grim. Everyone knew what was coming. The Concorde is losing, Nicole said simply. Their fleet losses are catastrophic. At this rate, they will fall within a year. Maybe sooner. Admiral Morgan brought up a star map showing the spread of the silence. The dark stain of destroyed worlds was growing larger every day, spreading toward human space like a disease. They're going to ask us for help, said Ryan Torres, commander of the Frontier Defense Network. They have no choice. Let them, said a voice from the corner. Ashley Moore was humanity's ambassador to the Coalition of Unaligned Species. She had spent decades building friendships with the species that the Concorde had rejected. Let them beg, the way they expected us to beg 100 years ago. There was bitterness in her voice. She remembered the stories her grandmother had told her about the day the Concorde came. The arrogance. The condescension. The absolute certainty that humanity would kneel. Nicole shook her head. We're not like them, Ashley. That's why we said no in the first place. The message from the Concorde came 3 days later. It was sent by High Arbiter Soren himself. He was ancient now. His body barely functioning, kept alive only by machines, but his mind was still sharp, and his pride was still strong. At first, people of Earth, the message began. A century ago, you refused our offer of membership. We thought you were fools. We believed you would be destroyed by the dangers of the galaxy. We were prepared to watch you fail. Soren paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was different. Smaller. Humbler. We were wrong. You have built something remarkable. You have created alliances we never imagined. You have developed technology that surpasses our own in ways we do not understand. And now, when we face our darkest hour, we find ourselves forced to do something we have never done before. The ancient arbiter lowered his head. We are asking for your help. Not demanding. Not commanding. Asking. The silence will destroy us all if we do not stand together. And for the first time in 50,000 years, the Concorde cannot stand alone. Nicole watched the message with her advisors. When it ended, the room was silent. Well, Ashley said finally, I didn't expect that. What do we do? Ryan asked. The Concorde treated us like children. They left us alone in the dark. Why should we help them? Because we're not them, Nicole replied. Because we don't leave people to die just because they were cruel to us once. Because if the silence destroys the Concorde, we'll be next. And because... She paused, searching for the right words. Because this is who we chose to be when we said no 100 years ago. We didn't refuse their alliance because we wanted to be alone. We refused because we wanted to be free, free to make our own choices, free to be better than they were. Ashley was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. The Coalition of Unaligned Species will need to vote. The Vortan, the Kelith, the Manthari, all of them were rejected by the Concorde too. They might not want to help. The Concorde too again. The Coalition of Unaligned Species. The Coalition of Unaligned Species. They might not want to help. Then we convince them, Nicole said. We show them that this is bigger than old grudges. We show them what humanity really stands for. The vote took place on New Eden, in the great chamber that Katie Reeves had built 50 years ago. Representatives from 20 species gathered, their different forms filling the room with strange sounds and lights. Ashley Moore stood before them all and spoke from her heart. They called us primitive, she said. They said we would beg. They left us to die alone in the dark. And now they're the ones begging. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of creatures who had their own reasons to hate the Concorde. But we're not them. We never were. That's why we refused their alliance in the first place. We didn't want to become masters over other species. We didn't want to build an empire of submission. We wanted to be partners, equals, friends. She spread her hands. The silence doesn't care about our old arguments. It doesn't care who was right and who was wrong. It will consume us all, human and conquered, and unaligned alike, unless we stand together. So I ask you, my friends, my allies, my family. What kind of coalition do we want to be? One that holds grudges while the galaxy burns? Or one that shows the universe what real strength looks like? The vote was not unanimous, but it was overwhelming. The coalition of unaligned species would stand with humanity, and humanity would stand with the Concord. Chris Morgan began preparing his fleet for war. The battle for the galaxy was about to begin. The combined fleet gathered at the edge of Concord space. Thousands of ships, from dozens of species, united against a common enemy. Human destroyers flew beside Vortan carriers. Kelith fighters danced around Manthari dreadnoughts, and scattered among them, battered and afraid, were the remaining ships of the Galactic Concord. Fleet Admiral Chris Morgan stood on the bridge of the flagship Unity, watching the formation take shape. He had dreamed of this moment his entire life. He had trained for it, planned for it, feared it, and now it was here. "Admiral," his first officer reported, "the silence has been detected in the Vareth system. It's heading for the core worlds." Chris nodded grimly. The core worlds were the heart of the Concord. If they fell, the entire galactic civilization would collapse. Trillions of lives hung in the balance. "All ships," he said into the fleet-wide channel. "This is Admiral Morgan. Today we fight for something bigger than any one species. We fight for the right of all living things to exist, to grow, to be free. The enemy we face has destroyed countless civilizations. It believes that organic life is nothing but fuel for its existence. Today we prove it wrong." He paused, thinking of all the humans who had lived and died to bring them to this moment. Daniel Carter, Laura Bennett, Kevin Shaw, Katie Reeves, Nathan Brooks, generations of people who had refused to give up. Today we show the galaxy what happens when free people stand together. Today we show them what humanity taught us all, that we never kneel. The fleet jumped to the Vareth system. What they found there was beyond anything they had imagined. The silence was enormous. It was not a single entity but a swarm. Billions of machines working together as one mind. They covered the sky like a living darkness, consuming everything in their path. Concord ships that tried to engage them were torn apart in seconds. Nothing in 50,000 years of galactic history had prepared anyone for this. But humanity had not spent the last century standing still. Nathan Brooks Jr. sat in a small room aboard the Unity, surrounded by screens showing data from every ship in the fleet. He had spent his entire life preparing for this moment. His adaptive warfare algorithms were ready. They were humanity's secret weapon, and now it was time to use them. "Activating the network," he said quietly. The algorithms spread through the fleet like lightning. They analyzed the silence's attacks. They learned its patterns. They adapted, and then they began to fight back. Human ships did not try to match the silence's power. They couldn't. Instead, they changed. Every attack, every defense, every maneuver was adjusted in real time based on what the algorithms learned. When the silence adapted, the humans adapted faster. When it changed tactics, they changed tactics better. The Concord ships watched in amazement. Their technology had remained static for millennia because they believed it was perfect. But perfection was weakness. It could not grow. It could not change. It could not survive against an enemy that evolved. Humanity had never believed in perfection. They had always believed in getting better. The battle lasted for 3 days. 3 days of fire and death and sacrifice. Hundreds of ships were destroyed. Thousands of lives were lost. But slowly, impossibly, the tide began to turn. On New Eden, Katie Reeves was 93 years old. She should have been resting, but instead she was coordinating the largest evacuation in galactic history. Refugee ships from Concord worlds poured into Coalition space, carrying billions of people who had nowhere else to go. Katie organized shelter. She arranged food. She gave orders that saved more lives than any weapon could. "This is who we are," she told her staff when they asked how she found the strength. "This is what we chose to be when we refused their alliance. Not conquerors. Not masters. Helpers. Friends. This is what it means to be human." Back in the Verath system, the final phase of the battle began. Chris Morgan led a strike force directly into the heart of the silence. It was a suicide mission. Everyone knew it. But if they could plant the containment device that human scientists had developed, they could seal the silence away forever. "Admiral," his first officer said, "you don't have to do this yourself." Chris shook his head. "Yes, I do. This is what leaders do. They don't ask others to take risks. They won't take themselves." The Unity pushed through the swarm. Machines tore at its hull. Explosions rocked the ship. Crew members died at their stations. But Chris held course. "Now," he ordered. The containment device activated. It was based on technology that Nathan Brooks had dreamed of decades ago. Refined by his children and grandchildren, it created a bubble in space-time, a prison from which nothing could escape. The silence screamed, a sound that echoed through the minds of every living being in the system. And then, it was gone, not destroyed, contained, sealed away for millennia. Humanity knew that perfection was impossible. They knew the silence might eventually escape. But they had bought time. Time for the galaxy to prepare. Time for civilizations to grow stronger. Time to be ready when the darkness returned. The battle was over. The survivors looked around at what remained. The fleet was shattered. Millions had died. But the galaxy still lived. 3 days later, High Arbiter Soren came to Earth. He walked slowly into the Coalition chamber, his ancient body frail and weak. Nicole Grant waited for him there. "You saved us," Soren said quietly. "We gave you nothing but contempt, and you saved us anyway." Nicole smiled gently. "We didn't do it for thanks. We did it because it was right." Soren was silent for a long moment. Then, he reached into his robe and pulled out a document. "This is the Standard Integration Treaty," he said. 50,000 years old. Offered to every species we encountered. He paused. "I would like to offer humanity full membership in the Concord. As equals, with all the rights and privileges that entails." Nicole looked at the document. Then she looked at Soren. Then she smiled. "No." The word hung in the air. Soren blinked. "But we're not refusing because we're proud," Nicole continued. "We're refusing because we have a better idea. A new alliance. One where no species is above another. Where independence is respected. Where adaptation is valued. Where everyone is truly equal." She extended her hand. "Join us," she said. "Not as masters. Not as clients. As partners. As friends." Soren stared at her hand for a long time. Then, slowly, he reached out and took it. "Yes," he whispered. "I think we would like that." Humanity had not joined the galaxy. The galaxy had joined humanity. A week later, Chris Morgan stood on the observation deck of the rebuilt Unity. His first officer found him there, staring at the stars. "What happens now, Admiral?" Chris was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. "Now, we do what we've always done. We keep going. We keep building. We keep getting better." He looked at the endless stars. Each one a promise of tomorrow. And we never, ever kneel. The future was waiting. And humanity was ready.